Serious, were you ever close to being killed, raped, kidnapped, robbed? If so, how did you avoid it, get away? Story 2. I was coming home late one night after work. Around 1 AM. I was 19 and still lived at home. My parents went to bed but left the porch light and security light on. I parked my car and was gathering my stuff when a red pickup truck with some guys in the bed drove past the side street. We lived one house from the corner. They stopped, threw it in reverse, and I heard one of them yell, "Get her." The next thing I know, there are at least 4 grown men running towards me. I ran on the porch, and thankfully my parents had not locked the deadbolt because I just had time to unlock the door and get inside. I was locking the door as the first man was reaching for the doorknob. I screamed bloody murder and went straight for the shotgun. My dad woke up when I slammed the front door shut and knew something was wrong. He already had his pants on and grabbed his .45. He looked out the window and the guys were running back to the truck. He went on the porch and they tore out of there. Police couldn't do much. We didn't get a license plate. And a red pickup in Houston? Probably one of thousands. They never came back and nobody ever spotted them around the neighborhood again. I was a homeless tweaker. I was hiding in a lifeguard tower after smoking dope with this one dude and he went out to get more. I'm just standing around, minding own business, when someone comes in. I think it's free, dude. It's not. For some reason I brushed it off, which was not very smart. He punched me right above the temple. Called me a fucking crackhead. "Excuse you, I smoke meth, get it right, Ty." We fought. At some point I punched him square in the nose and blood went thrusting everywhere onto the wall. He was literally right on me at one point, just about to rape me. His penis touched my vagina, is what I mean. But I was able to push him away in the nick of time. We fought what felt like forever. Eventually I was able to run off and hide. I thought he was following me in a car after that, but honestly I'm not sure. He never came back up to me or found me, so probably not. It traumatized me, but I mean, I'm 5 feet 2 and 120 pounds. He was 5 feet 10 and probably 220 or such. I fucking raged on him. I think the fact that I was high helped because I had so much more energy, but really, I try to give myself credit for fighting off a dude that big. Unfortunately it was too dark, so I never got a real description to report him. Completely random attack. Worst nightmare. I have at most been mugged twice, and both times it was a similar approach by the mugger. The first one was a boy around my age, who came to me asking me if I had picked on this girl that I happened to know, and telling me to come with him so that his friend could confirm whether I was the guy they were looking for. I refused and he kept insisting. So I told him that he could just take a picture with his phone and show it to his friend to confirm. He kept insisting, but my dance class started and I entered the room, so he gave up. Another time I was going back home, and it wasn't even dark. This guy comes to me and asks me if I had picked on his brother. Immediately smelling bullshit, I asked him what his brother's name was, but he refused to tell. He then took me to a corner and backed me against the wall and kept telling me not to pick on his brother and asking me to come with him to apologize to his brother. Luckily for me, this other guy happened to be passing through and he asked if something was wrong. He then asked me if I knew the other guy, to which I said no. He then stayed there telling him to let me go or he would call for help. The guy let me go and warned me not to pick on his supposed brother again. The guy who saved me followed me for a minute or two to make sure I would be okay. I can't thank him enough for saving me from an experience that could have been very traumatic. When I was 16, I was nearly kidnapped and God knows what else. I was waiting at a bus stop after band practice, maybe 9 PM, and some car drives up to the gas station behind me, hangs out, does some sud get gas or snacks, waits 5 minutes and leaves. He drives down the street where he still has visibility of me, and I him. Stays there for 5 minutes and drives back to do the same thing twice. Except the third time he drives back to the station, he pulls up in front of me. At this point, I'm steaming mad. I've always been attractive, so I'm always in my guard in public because creeps But this guy was clearly crossing a line. I storm over to the gas station, which had closed, and bang on the door. The clerk comes over and I tell him what's going on. We call my mom. She scoops me up. And we take a million pictures of him and his car. And follow him around a few miles to scare him straight. If I had been paying less attention, or was more naive, I have no idea what would have happened, and I'm happy with that fact. An ex started to become abusive towards me. One day I had enough and ended the relationship. I went to leave and he blocked my way. And he said if I tried to get past him, he'd kill me. I stepped around him. He reached out and grabbed my throat, slammed me backwards onto the floor, and fell to his knees next to me, strangling me. Right before I passed out I had a burst of energy, got an arm free, and he let up on his grip enough for me to get some air blood flow and started flailing around as hard as I could. I managed to slam him in the head with the side of my fist. My thumb knuckle nailed him right in the temple. It stunned him and he released his grip on my throat. I shoved him onto his side, jumped up and snatched up my bag, ran out of his house, got to my car, and left. After a concert at the Phillips Arena in Atlanta we called a cab and 4 of us hop in. When we take off, we all notice that there is a baseball hat over the meter, and when we asked for him to remove the hat so we could see the meter, he got enraged. He started screaming at us in broken English, "See how all die tonight. You gonna die tonight. The girls are gonna be raped and you all will dies." He took a turn into a sketchy ass neighborhood screaming that we were going to be raped and killed. We immediately called 911 and start giving his information and screaming at him to drop us off where he picked us up. He does. Then gets out of the car and tries to fight my brother. We grabbed my brother and told him it wasn't worth it, and we walked the mile to our hotel. Not my story, but something that happened to my aunt and cousins. They were in a Walmart parking lot and my cousins got in the running car while my aunt went to put the cart away. When she walked back she saw a sketchy dude walking around and looking in the car, so she booked it back to the car. Right before it looked like he was going towards the driver's door, she got in, locked it, and drove away as fast as she could. This happened when I was around 14. I used to be really into skateboarding, so I would skate around town pretty often. I was skating for a while, so I decided to head up to the gas station in the middle of town to buy a drink. I lived in a smaller town at the time. I went inside, bought a drink, and sat there on the sidewalk behind the gas station for a little bit to catch my breath and drink my drink. This cliche looking white van with no windows drove to the stop sign right next to where I was at. And the guy inside stared at me, trying not to make it too obvious. I joked to myself about being kidnapped because it was very rare where I lived. He drove away from the stop sign and I went back to skating around town, and every now and then I would see that van drive by and not really think anything of it. I thought maybe he was running errands since there were some stores and places to eat near where I was at. After that I started to skate home and the guy pulled up next to me and said that my dad had asked him to pick me up and take me home. I told him I had never seen him before and I wasn't going to get in the car. He then started yelling at me to get in the car or my dad was going to be mad. I started sprinting down the sidewalks and roads trying to lose this guy, and I even went through some little sidewalks in between houses so that he couldn't drive his car over to where I was at. He would have to go around. He was following me the whole time until I eventually made sure I wasn't being followed anymore and went back home. I told my parents and they were glad I was okay. For a while I wasn't allowed out as much, but I understood why. Very scary experience. Wouldn't want to go through that again. Throw away for a reason. My father was extremely violent and abusive, and was a cop at a time when domestic violence in police families wasn't really a thing people talked about. When I was 7, he came home drunk and suicidal in the middle of the night, and dragged me and my 8-year-old sister out of bed, and held us at gunpoint with his service pistol on our front steps. He called it in, taunting my hysterical mother and telling her that she was going to kill all of us and then himself. I remember our yard just being a sea of police lights. We lived in a very rural area, or I'm sure we would have had neighbors gawking. He eventually decided to let my sister and me go and hold my mother instead. We were the kind of abused kids who were more collateral damage to an abusive marriage. So we weren't really the prime target anyway. I distinctly remember police getting us and telling us to run as fast as we could to our grandmother, who was waiting on the far side of a phalanx of cop cars. I looked back at my mom as my sister and I ran hand in hand and genuinely thought that I was never going to see her again. Yeah. Good times. I found out later that my father's partner finally managed to talk him down and he surrendered his gun. My mother eventually showed up at my grandmother's house with a police escort, so there were some tears. Let me tell ya, it was a small town force in the 80s. So believe it or not, the whole thing was actually swept under the rug and he was just transferred to another town's force and ultimately continued his career without any problems. I'm well into my 30s and I'm always terrified that one day I'm going to hear that he actually did end up killing someone and we were just lucky that night. I got drugged in a bar on my 24th birthday. I was out with a big group of girls. And it was a weeknight. So we were dancing but not drinking a lot and most of the other girls left early so they could get up for work in the morning. It was just me and another girl left. And we were planning to call my boyfriend for a ride after we finished our drinks, my second one of the night. That's the last thing I remember before blacking in on a random sidewalk in a residential area completely disoriented and messed up. The rest of the night is spotty. But I remember walking to a friend's house nearby where my boyfriend picked me up. The next day the girl I was with filled me in on what she remembered. And apparently these guys had talked us into giving us a ride to our friend's house, then tried to take us home with them once we were in the car. We both kept insisting we needed to go to our friend's house. And I guess when they realized we weren't going to be cooperative they left us on the side of the road. Honestly, I feel pretty lucky that it wasn't worse, but it was definitely not my best birthday. Also, I think I had some sort of reaction to whatever they gave me because I felt woozy and sick for about 3 days after. I did, however, learn that I'm a stubborn bitch no matter what state I'm in. Which in this case saved me from some nasty shit. This happened to my cousin. She was 12 years old and walked home from school one day like she did every day. I am not sure if it was a common occurrence that she would come home alone to an empty house at this age or not. But this particular day she came home alone. After she finished dropping off her school stuff she went to use the bathroom. As she did this, some dude broke into the house and rushed her. Somehow he was able to drag her outside of the house and into his car. The next part of the story is unknown to me, and to be honest, I don't want to know the details. I think he took her back to his place and did things to her. Anyhow, when he was all done, he threw her in the trunk of his car and was presumably driving somewhere to kill her and dispose of her body. It just so happened that one of his brake lights was out on his car and a cop pulled him over as a courtesy to tell him that he needs to get it fixed. The cop heard my cousin in the trunk of the car and, well, you get the rest. He saved my cousin's life that day by random chance. I know it sounds Hollywood cliche, but it's true. My cousin is much older now. I think in her late 40s. Her life was never the same. Poor thing. She never did get her life in order. I mean, she does fine and takes odd jobs and bounces around the country. From boyfriend to boyfriend. Trying her next great idea for a company or whatever. She just sort of floats, and to be honest, I really don't blame her. I should really reach out to see how she is doing. TLDR. Cousin was brutally kidnapped and raped. But by sheer luck avoided being murdered. A really scrawny guy tried to jump in my car while I was waiting for my friends at Waffle House after we got off work at 4 AM. I'm a big dude, so I figured I could take him. But after I cracked my window to tell him to fuck off, he got his mouth as close as possible and said into the crack, "I'll fucking stab you." Opened the door and let me in and started banging on my window and constantly trying the locked car door. Had a nope. Rolled up the window until my 5 friends showed up a few minutes later. The guy tried to talk his way out of it, saying I was his friend and I was supposed to be giving him a ride home. Obviously my friends knew he was lying, and when they called him on his BS and he literally ran off. Thought about calling the police but figured it wasn't worth it. When I was a little kid, me and my brother were playing in a park nearby our house. So while we were playing and a lady in her 30s came to us and said she was a photographer for a children's sauce magazine and asked us if she can take some photos of us playing around the park for the magazine. Being dumb little kids, we happily agreed, thinking we will become famous. So after 10 to 20 minutes later, the lady said, "Thank you for being so lovely little children." So for a reply we just smiled. After that she said that for being such lovely children she has a gift. Thinking nothing of it, we just said yes. With a huge smile. She asked us to follow her to her van where the gifts were. We said okay and followed her. After walking for a minute or so, she said, "Spheres off my vans, come on and take your gifts." Thinking nothing of it, we jumped in the back of the van. Right after we jumped in, she almost closed the doors when an old gentleman came and asked her to stop and asked us if we knew who she was. We replied with a no, and the lady's jaw just dropped and she said, "Oh yeah you do," and said to the old man that she was our mom's friend. The old man asked us to come out of the van. And we came out, then the lady just gloomily just sat back in her van and the old man took us to the police station nearby. Then the police took us home and asked for the lady's description. We told them everything. After that we were never allowed to leave the house without an adult, and we got a talk on how about we shouldn't talk to strangers and especially never get into their vans. I was 8 and biking to a friend's house, and unfortunately I was wearing Crocs. Yeah, I know. My foot accidentally got too close to the front tire of my bike and flew my Croc off and shredded the front of my big toe. Lost most of the toenail. I was closer to my friend's house than mine. So I decided to limp the rest of the way there. Crying for obvious reasons. A truck pulled up beside me as I was getting close to a busy intersection I'd have to cross in order to get to my friend's house. The man yelled out to me, asking what a little girl like me was doing biking on my lonesome. And asked what happened to my foot. I was a really friendly kid. So at first I didn't mind telling him all about what happened. But then he started asking where I live and what street. And if he could give me a ride. I told him I was okay and continued to hobble along. But he started to get really persistent. Saying my toe would get infected and fall off if I didn't come with him right now. I felt uncomfortable and continued to deny him until I made it to the intersection. It was really busy and there was a lot of cars and witnesses going by. So he decided to just drive away. Wasn't until the next day when his poster was going up all around town for trying to lure a girl around my age into his truck that evening that I told my mom and I had to give a statement to the police. I'm 16. This was a couple months ago. So I was walking home from a school football game and it was around 8. I have no friends so I couldn't hitch a ride from one and I was at the game for school credit. Yeah, like I'm a loser. And when I was walking home there was a Prius that didn't look too sketchy and it was driving by. Also the Prius was the only car I've seen drive by all night. But I didn't think anything of it and so it goes by, and I think these PPL knew where I live because when I took the route I normally take. They were stopped there and as I was passing by they rolled down the window and asked me if I knew where a certain address was, which was mine. And they said they wanted to meet with someone, but nobody is at my house around this time because I have one sibling and both parents who all work night shifts at certain jobs except for my sister who wasn't home that night, and I told them no, but the man just stares at me coldly saying, "I know you're lying kid," and says if I don't get in the back of the car he would kill me, but because of adrenaline and instinct I get close to his window really fast and I punch him as hard as I can to distract him for a few seconds. Then I jump in a neighbor's bush and start crawling in the dark away from where he probably saw me, and instead of going home where he would probably try looking for me I go to a neighbor's house and tell them to call 911 and I tell them everything. Then 2 weeks later from that, the police end up finding the man who threatened me, and apparently he was a registered sex offender and a pedophile rapist. I was 10 and at school. I'd stay behind to clean the classroom whilst the rest of the kids went out to play. Between my classroom and the yard there was what essentially passed as a wide alleyway, with no visibility to either the classrooms or the yard. I was walking down this place when I spotted a beaten up old car just parked. There were 2 adult men sat in it. As I got closer to the car the guy close to me grinned and swung his door open. I panicked and ran. And didn't stop running until I was stood next to a teacher. I saw the car drive off through the open front gate. A few weeks later a letter went round the school warning parents of 2 men in an old car snatching children from nearby schools. My friend and I, both 15-year-old boys at the time, around 2002, were approached by a guy who kept giving us cigarettes and trying to get us to go behind some janky laundromat to drink hard liquor with him. We kept turning him down, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. We were able to slip away and hide, and we saw him driving around looking for us. I never saw him again, but my friend happened upon him on a few other occasions, always talking to young boys and girls. Whenever the guy saw my friend, he always abruptly left. I also lived down the street from a child molester who ended up chloroforming one of my, and many others, childhood bullies to death. But that wasn't connected to me otherwise. I was leaving a shopping mall with my wife and saw a homeless guy walking through the parking lot. As we're loading our stuff into the car, I decide to give this guy a few bucks. I'm pulling the money out of my pocket as I turn around and he's very close to us, walking with purpose towards me with a big effing knife. I just stuck my hand with my money out to the guy as everything slows down. It was pretty automatic, to be honest. He stops, takes the money, says thanks and turns around, concealing the knife in his jacket as he walks away. I don't know how it would have turned out if I didn't decide to give him money. I don't know how it would have turned out if I didn't turn around. It took me a while to get over that one though. I did call the cops and gave a description of the guy, but by the time they got there he was already gone and I don't know whatever came of it. I was returning from a job out of state. I had helped my brother with a carpentry project and it was pretty late at night. I pulled over at a highway rest stop to take a whiz, and as I was standing there doing my business I see a guy out of the corner of my eye standing maybe 3 feet back instead of walking towards the line of urinals beside me. Something caused me to look the other way and there was another guy standing there moving in on me. I grabbed a can of spray paint out of my jean jacket pocket and turned around with my dick out and sprayed them both pretty bad in the face. I realized then that the second guy was armed with a length of pipe. I got out of there and called 911 and told them about 2 guys with blue paint all over their faces at the rest stop who needed to be questioned. I was in Brazil about 2 years ago, Rio de Janeiro, and I went to Copacabana on the first afternoon around 4:00. And I sat on the beach watching the beautiful waves. And 2 guys came on each side of my GF and I pulled out a machete and, well, I don't understand Portuguese but I understood what he wanted. Gave everything in my wallet. What he didn't know was that I had $2,000 in my shoes to protect the amount from pickpockets, so he only got $80. He didn't touch my girlfriend. Told me to stay there, but we walked away fast near more groups of people and took the first taxi back to the hotel. Fucking hate Brazil now. I was 14 when this happened. I was visiting my mother for the summer. She lives in a very small apartment and at the time there was a lot of druggies there. There was one guy who came up to me asking to borrow a charger since I had the same kind of phone. My mom gave him the charger because she could just get me another. I had seen him a few times after this but didn't think much of it until one day I was sitting outside and he pulled up in his car. He said to me, "Hey, wanna come to Tim Hortons with me?" So I was scared of course, so I told him that my mother wouldn't let me. He talked a bit after that and then drove off. A few days later me, my brother and my mom got home from somewhere. Me and my brother stayed outside and talked. I kept hearing whistling and someone yelling hey, so I looked over and the guy was there. My brother and me went over there and he started saying how nice my hair was. I had dyed it earlier that day to pink, blue and purple. He asked what we was planning to do when we were older and I said artist. Well, my brother said engineer. He said it was cool and we talked. He kept repeating himself and I just zoned out. After a bit I looked down and the man had his dick in his hand. I backed up and hid behind my brother and the man just told me don't be afraid, and then he ran away, got in his car and drove off. I never did see that guy aging. But I firmly believe that if my brother wasn't with me he would have taken me and done horrible things to me. I'm thankful he was there. I've been robbed once. Mostly because I got lost and walked into the wrong part of New York on my own. Not knowing that I should steer clear of that area. Was threatened by 2 people with knives. Handed over something like $200 I had on me. They didn't believe that I didn't have anything else. I had a cell phone and a watch. But both were of the $10 Walmart variety and they didn't want those, so they rifled through my pockets and took my passport. Tore my t-shirt in the process. Pushed me into a wall and then scrammed. Luckily I didn't have anything worse than a few scrapes and bruises. I made a report to the police. Got told I was an idiot. And then went to the German embassy, where I was also told I was an idiot but at least got a new passport. Edit. I see my original post gave something of a wrong impression of the New York City police in my original post, was typing this out on my phone and trying to keep it brief as a result. They never actually called me an idiot. The police officer very politely pointed out that this wasn't the best neighborhood of New York and that it had a history of crime. And that it wasn't the best idea to be walking through it alone after dark. And looking like I was obviously a tourist. I then said something like, "So you're saying I was a bit of an idiot?" To which the officer replied, "You said that, sir. Not me." Double quote. Also, this was in 2008 or 2009? Thereabouts. Anyways. I have been shot at before. I avoided it by running. Losing a shoe as I did and gashing my foot pretty badly. I had a gun put to my face. But I just told the guy, whose very intense conversation I was interrupting, that I didn't have a phone, true, and I was going to sit behind the nearest tire and finish my juice. Which I did. No one was shot. I got held up at gunpoint one night while jogging. I was doing a late night run to try and help with my mounting depression insomnia. I had been thinking about killing myself for a while. And the one thing that was holding me back was the idea of my family thinking they had failed me. So I figured, win-win. Right? I asked the guy to shoot me and started walking towards him. I was asking nicely, too. But I think it freaked him out because he started screaming at me and saying shit like, "Take another step and I'll fucking shoot you." So I kept taking more steps. He turns and runs and I start running after him asking him to shoot me. It was really dark. And I never saw a gun. So maybe I just called his bluff. Or maybe he just didn't want to kill anyone. Either way, not my proudest moment. Running after my would-be mugger. Crying. That was a long and sad run. Some sick fuck tried to rape me on a jogging trail. Thankfully he was a bit smaller than me. Skinny and in piss poor physical condition. And clearly wasn't anticipating a fair physical fight. Because I ended up beating the shit out of him before he did anything really awful. I can't overstate how lucky this was. I'm no athlete or martial artist. Just a woman built like a linebacker who learned basic self-defense from my dad, and believe me, I was thanking my lucky stars for it at that moment. Because of the adrenaline rush at the time, I didn't really process it properly and wasn't panicked in the least. I was mostly worrying about all the 12-year-old girls I'd seen on that trail playing Pokemon Go that day. Took a few weeks to sink in how badly that could have gone for me, and I still get really uncomfortable when I hear about girls getting raped or murdered on jogging trails. When I was in middle school, I came home from school one day and noticed something odd in the big glass window at the front of the house. Our back door was wide open. So I figured one of my parents were home early from work. I walked in the house to see it was totally trashed. I then heard voices at the back door. It definitely wasn't either of my parents. I then dropped my bag and ran out the front door. I ran down to a friend's house which was a few houses down. I then called the cops and said my house was being robbed. Police arrived and the guys were all gone. Along with all the stuff. Take note that I was like 13 or 14 at the time, so it wasn't like I could do much. I was once robbed at knife point. I'm a pretty tall guy, 6 feet 2 inches, but I was pretty skinny then. I had just bought Worms for the PC and Menswear Nuisance album. Was talking the escalator down on Argyle Street in Glasgow. Guy comes up next to me and asks me for the time. I tell him I didn't have a watch. He then pulls out the knife. Probably about 3-4 inches long. And says, "Give me the bag," and I hand him over the bag. We are now at the bottom of the escalator and he asks me if I have any other money. I pulled out a load of change from my pocket and give him that. He asks if I have anything else. I say no. I then ask him if I can have my train fare home. He gives me 50p and says, what do you need? I said I needed the acute one, meaning swap it for the 50p, so he gives me that as well. He then tells me to walk away and he goes back up the escalator. Mugged and got a acute one. 50 refund. I don't think there was a conductor on the train, so I kept my acute one. 50. Edit. Thanks for the silver, kind stranger. My first ever award. When I was 9 or so, I went to the bathroom in a restaurant that was in a mall. Peed at the urinal and a big mentally disabled guy was standing behind me when I turned around. He frightened me and said he wanted to show me something, and grabbed my wrists and tried to pull me into the stall. I pulled my arms but he would not let go. When I was 9 I thought he either wanted to show me a giant shit or hurt me in the stall. Just as he was pulling me across the stall threshold he let go of one wrist to close the stall door. I kicked him pretty hard in the leg and pulled my other arm away and got free. Ran out to my family that was eating in the restaurant and sat down. I didn't say anything but they all knew something happened because I was white in shock. And just then the guy was speed walking out of the bathroom leaving the restaurant. My mom said, what happened? I just said that guy tried to pull me into the stall and my 70-year-old grandmother jumped up and chased him before I finished talking. They made it to the mall and just by chance there was an undercover mall security guy sitting outside the restaurant and tackled the guy cause my grandmother was yelling to get that guy. When I was in my 20s, I got home from a business trip in the middle of the day and was driving back to my office from the airport, which involved being on the interstate for 50 miles or so. This was in the 80s, and cell phones weren't a thing yet. An old car with 2 men inside starts following me. Then they pull up beside me. The man in the passenger seat tells me that one of my back wheels is about to come off the car. Okay. Well, my car was fairly new and was running fine as far as I could tell. No handling problems. Nothing. I remembered that an upcoming exit had a full service gas station with an attached mechanics shop. So I exited there. And the men in the other car followed me. I rolled up to the entrance to the mechanics shop, where I was sure there would be people around, and opened my window. Out walked this absolute mountain of a mechanic. I mean, he was over 6 feet tall, and a good 275 pounds. I told him that the men in the car who followed me said my back wheel was about to come off, but I didn't think there was a problem. Anyway, giant mechanic man started ambling over to the car that had followed me and they very quickly hauled us out of there and got back on the interstate. I wish I could have got their number plates. I didn't even think about how sketchy the whole situation was until it was over. When I was a young boy, probably 12 or 13, my dad and I took a spontaneous vacation to Duluth, MN. Since I'd never been there, I'd honestly never been on vacation before. So I was so excited to experience being somewhere awesome just for the fun of it. We had decided before leaving that would save money by skipping the hotel and sleeping in the truck at a rest lot. He'd sleep on an air mattress in the back of the truck, with the topper, and I would sleep in the cab. We found a rest stop in town and went to sleep. At one point in the middle of the night I had to use the restroom. So I left the cab and used the men's room at the rest stop. There was one other guy in there using a urinal. The best word I can use to describe him was soggy. He looked like a mess. I'm pee shy, so I just stood at a different urinal for a few seconds and promptly left. He was blatantly watching me the whole time. I get about halfway to the truck when I see he's following me. I begin to run and so does he. I managed to barely get into the truck on time to lock the door behind me, where he's now pulling on the handle. Breathing heavily, I begin to yell D-A-A-A-D-D-A-A-A-D, wake up, and he pops up from the back like a meerkat. The guy locks eyes with my dad and quickly makes a 180 into a minivan and they speed off. I've honestly never given it all that much thought since it happened. Probably just tried to repress it or something. Having typed it out, I'm kind of shaking a little. TL. DR. 13-year-old me almost got kidnapped at a rest stop in the middle of the night. This is copied from another thread I've written in. I was 9 or 10. and I was in a Walmart with my mom. She liked to keep me nearby when we were shopping but would give me some more independence if I told her where I would be. She was shopping for movies and I wanted to look at shoes. She said I could go look at them and we'd meet up in 10 minutes. Well, as I was over by the shoes, they were right next to the underwear. I decided it wouldn't hurt to spend a minute in that aisle. I also wanted to look at bras I couldn't fit. I was a very small child. Kind of a late bloomer. As I'm looking, I noticed these two large men in the aisle with me, moving steadily closer to me. One of them looked right at me, and every cell in my body said run. There was no reason for these men to be there. And thankfully my parents raised me to be aware of my surroundings and be wary of strangers. I have no doubt these two men would have tried to kidnap me. I was an easy target. Small, weak, and alone. I ran back to DVDs and asked a salesperson to page my mom over to where we were. I was shaking and almost crying. It was a while before I felt comfortable leaving my mom's side when shopping. And even longer before I felt comfortable going back into that Walmart. When I was around 12, I had started getting into cycling in the area around our house. To understand the story you have to first know a little about the country area I grew up in. I grew up in a busy city in a country in Africa, where, as an expat, you were immediately the center of attention in a crowd or on the street. As a girl, I was never allowed to walk around my house without another person there. When I started cycling I would never stop, so I would feel pretty safe. However, one time I stopped at the gate of a friend of ours to drop off something, thinking I would be in and out pretty fast. But they didn't come to the gate. I immediately realized a group of guys on the corner who were obviously talking and laughing about me. One of the adult guys came up to me and started asking for my bike and flirting with me. I said something like leave me alone but he wouldn't do that. So I got on the bike and sprinted off towards home. The guy chased me. I was 12 and not too fast. And he was a seriously athletic man. There was one steep hill I had to climb to get to my house and I knew he would catch me on it. So I quickly asked a man I passed to help me, and kept cycling for what I assumed was my life. I got to the hill and made the utterly stupid decision to slow down and look behind me, and the guy I had pleaded with was walking with a guy chasing me in the other direction. To this day I am grateful to that man for preventing what would have been some serious mental trauma at the least. I know it doesn't sound too intense compared to other comments on this thread, but I have been told stories my whole life of the things that happen to girls who are alone in dangerous places, or safe places that become dangerous in an instant. So I assume the worst would have happened. There was a guy I used to date in middle school who I came in contact with again at a family friend's wedding party. There were many rumors on how he had consented sex with or raped girls on school grounds. He had gotten in trouble a lot, so everyone believed the stories. At this wedding party, we were chatting and he was a bit too flirty for my tastes. I tried to subtly push him away but he never got the hint. There was a dark corner of the area the people had rented out and it was hidden by chairs and tables, and he tried calling me over to it once to show me something. Now, I don't like listening to rumors about people, but when you're being invited over to a dark, concealed corner by a guy who allegedly raped people in middle school, everything rushes to your mind. I never left my parents' side again at that party. When I am in grade 12, I moved out my boarding school to rent a room just to be sure I can sleep well for preparing China's college entrance examination. The landlady was an old lady and she was very kind to me. In winter, my room was very cold, so the landlady kindly lighted a stove. There were several stones to support a circular iron plate to seal the stove export so the smoke will go out through the chimney. One day however the landlady accidentally blocked off the thin chimney by one stone. Then the carbon monoxide began to fill the room. When I fall asleep I know nothing, and I will never know anything if I don't keep that 5 AM alarm to wake me up for an early running to stimulate spirit for the crucial test for a Chinese student. When I got up that day, I felt the world rotated rapidly and my view was full of golden sparks. If I don't set that alarm, maybe I would not be noticed until very late, because I wouldn't use a lock but just shut the door. so the landlords couldn't tell whether I went to school or not. And only at night. The landlady would come to the room to light the stove. When I was 7 I was going out to play with some friends. We went to some park not far away. We stayed until night and my friends left without me noticing. Then some man in a white van came towards me, asked me if I could show him the way to some street nearby. I said yes and he asked me to get into his car to show him. And I was thinking for a long time and I was gonna say yes, but the guy decides to grab my arm and try to pull me in. But I barely managed to escape and run into the bushes and sneak home since I had some dark clothes on. Another time I was 11, my friend invited us to his birthday party. Really fun and all, and then he mentioned some homeless guy cave. He said that he got assaulted and ran away there, so we went with sticks. We found some blankets and a bloody knife. We were terrified and I saw some guy with a white t-shirt walk around. I hear some stick crunch and I felt a small pain right on my arm. The dude tried to assault me by throwing a stick, so my move was throw my stick at him and it hit his face. And we ran for it. A different time I was 8. One of my friends invited me to go with his friends somewhere. His friend was 16 or 17. He led us to his friends in a forest and then they started unbuckling his pants. I thought oh hell no and ran. One tried to grab me and my friend was still there, so I said run. I hid in that forest for 3 hours trying to run away and escaped. My friend doesn't want to talk about what he did. But I don't wanna ask anymore since I think he has some trauma from what happened. His friends got arrested after because my mom called the cops. I don't know where they are now, but I hope they're doing horrible. Late to the party but hope someone reads. I used to live in a fairly more dangerous place than I do now. So I learned how to tell which people were dodgy and looking for trouble. Another thing I realized was that if you looked weak they will come after you. As in the past I've been asked for money and then robbed. One night with a friend we're waiting for the bus and I see a group of dodgy guys crossing the road straight at us. First thing that crosses my mind. I walk towards them and say, hey. Do you have some money? They look completely puzzled. I repeat aggressively, do you? That left us alone and quickly made their way back to where they came from. Still proud about that one. It's been 20 years. While most stories are about young boys in public restrooms or rest areas. When I talk to my girlfriends it's always someone in our family and all of our stories. And every single one of my girlfriends has an experience or story. Seemed normal. Like we just nonchalantly share it once someone breaks the ice, because I guess it's the norm for girls to get touched and violated by a family or family friend. I hate that I feel this is normal for girls. My best friend and most important person in my life is a male who was sexually abused too. Reading this makes me feel for all men. Glad everyone bravely shared their stories here. I think other women need to read this and see that not all men are completely oblivious to the amount of rape and molestation going on, and some know how it feels. I have 2 girls and I pray that they will not have a story of their own. I do what I can and I've never even left them alone with anyone but their dad or grandmas. Either way, danger is everywhere. Keep your babies safe, everyone. There are a few of each TBH. The one that sticks out the most is pretty short. Last year in March I was going to a local Comic Con and my mom said to take her Mustang NP. It's also a great car. We get there and take a break to go home and take the dogs out. We had already met and took pics with Jamie Lannister, Cansot begin to try his real name, and we're so gonna go back for Mitchell Fassbrejavor, Magneto. Cansot spell. Help. On the way back we got a flat. No big deal. Pull off to the side of an off-ramp and being on the passenger side I tell my mom I'll change it and for her to stay in the car. It was too dangerous for her exit. I get the tire, the jack and everything and I start to jack up the car. Another car stops and a large guy gets out. Maybe 6'7", 250 plus, retired basketball player. He has a better jack and he starts to help me. Be in mind I'm in 4-inch heels and very tight clothes. But already did half the work. Next thing I know I see a car flying straight at us and my first reaction was to rip up the guy helping because he was closer to the impact. He sustained pretty bad injuries but survives. I managed to kick off the hood and only rolled onto my mom's car, sustaining a few cracked and bruised ribs as well as a sprained ankle. The Chevy Caprice was going 110 kph. About 60 mph. The weird thing is something told me to look up. Like before everything happened it got so quiet I could hear the wind. And I was on a major highway. But heard a voice whisper to me look ups. It was surreal to say the least.